Hello friends, in this video we will learn everything about Django REST framework. So let's see what we will cover in this course. So first of all we will understand what Django is, then we will understand what REST APIs are. After that we will set our environment, then we will install everything, the Django and the Django REST framework, and then we'll create our own project and application, and then we'll understand everything about Postman, because if you want to work as a REST API developer, then you should understand what Postman is and why do we need this. After that we will learn everything about Django REST framework, and we will have lots of examples and we will work with everything what Django REST framework can. So let's first of all understand what Django is. Now Django is an open source Python framework and it's used for web applications. And there are many other Python frameworks which you can use. For example, there are Flask, Tornado, Hug, Falcon, and there are many of them. But the Django and Flask are the most used and most famous frameworks of Python. Now platforms like YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, and Dropbox are using Django, and all the Netflixes made in Flask. So as you see, these frameworks are very strong and they are used for most crowded applications. So that's why it's necessary for new developers to understand at least one of these frameworks. Now in this course, we will cover everything about Django REST framework. So let's go ahead and understand first of all what REST APIs are. Now REST API or Restful Services stands for Representational State Transfer, and also the API stands for Application Programming Interface. API. So now let's understand how APIs work. For this, imagine you have a client. The client can be your browser or your mobile app which you are using. Then on the other side we got a server. So when you open an application in your mobile phone or a website in the internet, it sends basically a request. And this request is called HTTP. So it is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Now with the help of this protocol, your request goes directly to the server. Now server takes your request, and on the basis of that request, it will give you a response, so an answer. And this answer is also an HTTP answer. So we call this HTTP response. And then of course the response comes back to the client. Now this request can be, for example, to sign up for a website or fill a form, which means you're creating something. So the first HTTP request or response is create. Or if you're reading a blog, so for this we have an HTTP request of read. And then if you update the data, for that of course we need another HTTP request, which is update. And also you may delete some data. So for this we got another HTTP request, which is delete. And together we call this CRUD operations. So if you hear a word like CRUD, so it means create, read, update, and delete operations. Now to use all those HTTP CRUD operations, we have some HTTP methods. For example, to read the data, we have an HTTP method which is called get. Now the server understands this method. If you send a request, for example, just read, the server may give you some error because it doesn't understand. But if you send an HTTP method by the name of get, server understands this and it will give you the response on the basis of that get request. And to create the data, we will send a post request to the server. So if you are using a form, then inside your form, for the method parameter, you will define the post HTTP method. And then if you want to update a data, for that we will use the HTTP method of put. And also to delete the data, we'll use the HTTP method of delete. So now if these methods are new for you, don't worry, we will cover everything one by one in this course. Now the question comes here, why do we need REST API or RESTful services? For this, let's understand what we did before. Before, if a client sent a request to the server, the response of that request was HTML file. So you want to read something, then the server sent an HTML data or an HTML file for you to read that data. And if you wanted to create something, so the server has sent you an HTML file with creating the data. Now of course, as you can imagine, sending lots of HTML data and taking them back, it takes a lot of time. So we would be needing a lot of memory. So that's why the developers thought to do something better, and therefore we use the REST API. Now what we do with REST API? Now for REST API, the client sends a request for the server, but the server in the response of that doesn't send any HTML file, but instead of that data. So this way the server doesn't need to take care of all those HTML files. It just sends all those data from our database to the client, and then the client generates the HTML data or take care of the HTML for the user and also to show all those data there. So nowadays this kind of connection between client and server is called the best practice because it is faster and also it saves a lot of memory, and also it gives a lots of possibilities which we will cover in this course also. So now we got two different areas for programming. The first one in the server side, so it is the backend, and for the client side we have the front end. For front end, for example, you may be using the libraries like React, Next, and Vue.js, or any other frameworks. But for the server side, then you have your own frameworks. For example, Django of course, ASP.NET, Express, and there are a lot of them. So this way we have backend developers and also front-end developers. But if you learn both of them, for example Django and React, then you will be called full stack developer. So it all depends to you in which area you go, but you should understand in the server side we are not using React, Next.js or Vue.js because they are JavaScript libraries and they are responsible for the UI, for the user interface, so the data which the users can see. And for the server side, or Django, ASP.NET and Express, which sends the responses to those requests of the client. So basically we send all the data and we have connection with our database and we have nothing to do with the front end. Now I think it is enough for the theory, so let's go ahead and see everything in action. So I have already created the project folder and I call this REST backend. You can call it anything you want, and I have opened that inside my VS Code. You can use any code editor you like, but I prefer VS Code, so that's why I'm using in all my projects the VS Code. So after that we'll go to terminal, and from here we open a new terminal. So inside the terminal, first of all we need to check if Python is installed inside my operating system. So for this I'll type python 3 -- version, not minus version, and then press enter. Now as you see, this is the version of Python I'm using. So if you see something like this, it means that the Python is already installed inside your operating system. If not, just go ahead in browser and type here Python, and after that you need to download the Python. So from python.org you go to downloads, and from here you download the Python for you. And after that you will be able to install Django also. Now here, first of all, we need to create a virtual environment. So I'll say python 3 -m, and here I'll say venv. So I'll make a venv virtual environment. And what's the name of that venv or virtual environment? So as the name, I'll call this for now just REST-venv, so REST virtual environment. So you can call it anything you want, it's all up to you. Now I'll press enter and the Python will create the virtual environment for me. Now VS Code is suggesting me to install some extensions for Python, so it's a good idea to do this. I'll go ahead and say yes. And if you see a folder something like REST-venv now, it means virtual environment is installed inside your project. Now we have to activate this virtual environment to install the Django inside this. So to activate the REST framework inside Windows, you will use the name of your virtual environment. So for me it is REST-venv, and after this you'll put the backslash, and after that you'll type scripts and then again backslash and then activate or activate.bat. So this way you will be able to activate the virtual environment for you. For me, as I'm inside the macOS, so I'll say source and then the name of the virtual environment, which is REST-venv, and then I can say bin and then activate, and I press enter. Now as you see, the virtual environment is activated for me. If you see something like this, so it means you're good to go. Now let's clear here. So now we need to install the Django. For this, I'll say just Python 3 and then I'll say here -m. After this, pip. So pip should install what for me? Then it should install the Django. So Python 3 -m pip install Django. If you're inside Windows, you don't need to use the 3. And after this, we press just enter. And pip will install the Django for us. After this, we have to just upgrade the pip for us. So I'll copy this command from here and just paste it here and press the enter again. And now it's also updated, so we are ready to start our project. So now as the Django is installed for me, so let's go ahead and say Django admin and start a project. So I'll say Django admin. What should Django admin do for me? So start a project. Now I'll call the project and we have to give a name to this project. So I'll say this should be my DRF. So Django REST Framework project. And I'll put a dot here because I want to use the REST backend as my actual folder and I don't want to create double folder with the name of DRF. So after this, I'll press just enter. Now as you see, the DRF project is created for me. Now we are good to go. So after this, of course, we need to start app also because we want to learn REST API. So of course, for REST API, we need our app. So here I'll say Django admin and start app. And the app name here will be REST_API. Of course, you can call it anything you want. For me, it makes sense like this. So I'll just call this REST API and I'll press enter. Now as you see, the REST API or our app is already created. Now we are good to go and install the Django REST framework. For this, we'll go to browser and here I'll type Django REST or Django DRF you can type. So I'll just Django REST framework, and from Django REST framework.org you can just go to tutorials and here you can start the quick start or serialization. We'll learn everything here, so don't worry about them. Now I'll go to serialization and here's all the process. So we have created the virtual environment and after this you have to install the Django, then the Django REST framework. So that is what we need to do as next. I don't use the pigments because it will be using for the code highlighting, but I don't need this. So I'll just install this one. I'll go ahead inside my VS Code and from here I'll say just Python 3 -m and I'll say pip install. And what you want to install, I want to install the Django REST framework, so I'll press enter. Now as you see, the Django REST framework is also installed for us, so let's clear the terminal. And after this, I'll go ahead inside my main project, so which is the DRF. Inside this, we got the settings file. So as usual, we need to register our app which we have created and also the REST framework, the third-party app which we have installed for this Django project. So we have to register everything inside our main or our core project. For this, I'll go down here inside the installed apps. So what's the name of our app? It is REST_API. So here I'll type REST_framework. So if you go inside the documentation also, it will tell you how to install this app. So as you see, installed apps, you will give the REST framework, so the name of the package we have installed, and also the snippets. Now the snippets is the app which they are creating inside this tutorial. So it has nothing to do. For us, the app name is REST_API. Now let's go back to VS Code, and here I'll create some comments. So I'll say my apps. So first of all, so differentiate between the third-party apps and my own apps, and then here I'll say third-party apps like this. You can call it anything you want, but I want to separate them like this. So later on, if I get more apps and also other packages, so I can differentiate between my apps and also the other packages. So it's just my preference. If you want, do it like this. If you don't want, just leave it like that. Now I'll save it here. And then, of course, as usual, we need to start our project. Now I'll make the terminal a little smaller so we can see everything here also. And here now I'll say Python 3 manage.py, and then I'll say run server. So run server. And if you're not familiar with Django, please follow the link in the description. I have a complete course on Django, so please first of all watch that, and after that it will be very easy for you to follow this tutorial also. So I highly recommend you to watch that video if you are just a beginner of Django. Now after this, here we can mention our port. So I'll say port 8000, which is the default one. Of course, if you are using the port 8000 for any other app, so you can change the port number here, for example 8080 or whatever you want. So I'll just press enter. And now as you see, the deployment server is running. So let's go ahead and watch if everything is working. Now we have to follow the link from here. So let's copy this link, or you can press just Control or in Mac Command and please click this. It will open the Django inside your browser. Now if you see something like this, it means you are good to go. So now we are ready to start learning the Django REST framework. So for that, we'll go back to Django REST framework documentation, and inside this tutorial, you'll see they start everything with serialization. Now let's understand first of all what serialization is, and after that, we will start using the serialization inside our project. So now let's understand what serializers are. Now before sending the data to end clients, so frameworks like React, Angular, Vue, or any other UI framework, first of all, we have to convert all those data into a content type which they can support. For example, JSON or XML. Now most of the time the end results of APIs are JSON. So now let's understand how serializers helps us for this process. Now before understanding the serializers, we have to understand two more Django terms, because for beginners a lot of time I have seen these terms make difficulty to understand the serializers. So the first term is the query set. Now lots of time beginners don't know what a query set is, and that's why they can't understand the serializers when we try to explain them. So what's a query set? A query set is a collection of data or collection of objects from your database. So it will be a bunch of data which you are trying to fetch from your database. And the next term is the modal instance. Now beginners often doesn't understand what modal instances are, so this makes for them also difficulty. So let's understand this term also. So what's an instance? An instance of the class represents one object from that model. Now remember, which maps to one row of the table in the database. So what it means? So for example, if we got a customers table. Now inside this table, we got more data which we have saved. So we have these companies here, we have ID, we have last name and first name. Now if we fetch all of them together, so for example, in SQL, if I say select all from customers, it will take all these data for me from this customers table. And this bunch of data will be called a query set. Now it has nothing to do with model instance. It will take all the data for me, so it's a collection of objects. That's why it's a query set. But if I just say select from customers table where the ID is, for example, 1 or 2 or whatever I call this, so it will take just one row for me. So it will fetch just the row 1. So it will say the company A, the last name and the first name of that user for me. So to fetch just one row, we call this a modal instance. So which maps to one row of the table in the database. So one row of the table in the database. It's a modal instance. So now as we understand what query set and modal instances are, so let's go ahead and try to understand what serializers are. So serializing is a process in which we convert complex data types like query sets and modal instances. Now we know what they are. So with the help of the serializer, we convert these complex data types into the native Python data type. So this process to convert those complex data types to native Python data type is called serializing. And we got another term for this also, which is called deserializing, which means we will convert the native Python data types back to a difficult query set or difficult data type like query set or model instance. And after that, as we converted them to native Python data type, then it's very easy for us to convert it again to a content type, for example, like JSON or XML. Now, if you're not familiar with JSON or XML or other content types, so please pause the video and try to at least understand the JSON, because almost all the front-end frameworks like React, AngularJS, Vue.js, and most popular of them are using JSON, and they can understand JSON, and this way they can fetch the data just easily from your backend. So after this, we got a good definition for serializers. So if someone asks you what serializers are, so you can say serializers help to convert complex data such as query sets and model instances into native Python data types, which then can be rendered very easily into XML, JSON, or other content types. So now, as we understand what serializers are, so let's go ahead and see everything in action. So now to use the serializers, we first go to our VS Code, and here inside our app, we have to create our models. Now here, I'll create a new model, so the model name will be post like that, and it will inherit from models.model like this. And here we will define some basic fields because we want to test out everything. So I'll say here a title, and this should be models.charField like this, and the max length of this will be something like 150. And then we'll create an author also. So here I'll say the author like this, and this will be also charField, so models.charField, and a max length of, here I'll say just 100 because it's enough for an author. And then we will use some email, so email, and I'll say models dot email field. And here we don't need anything, but I'll say the default of this should be nothing, so it's not required. Now I think that's enough, so let's save it. And of course, after creating a model or making any changes inside our models, we have to make our migrations. So I'll go back to my virtual environment in the terminal, and here I'll say python 3 manage.py make migrations. So like this, and enter. Make migrations. I did a typo here, so make migrations like this, and the migration is done for us. So we got a model of posts ready to map with our database. Now then we will go ahead and say python 3 manage.py, and I'll say make, not make migrations. Now I'll say migrate. But as you see, there are many other fields also available, and the reason is that the Django create the tables also for our admin user and admin groups. So now I'll clear the terminal here. And now as we got the table for our admin, so let's go ahead and create the user for this. So I'll say python 3 manage.py create super user, so super user, and press enter. And here I'll say the name of this will be admin, and also the email address admin@example.com, like this. And then I'll give it a normal password, so it will be password 123, password 123, because we are using this just for development, so it doesn't matter if it's too common or very insecure. Now I'll say yes, and it's created. Now let's clear the terminal. And here now inside our app, let's go to the admin and register our new model. So first of all, we have to import that model. So here I'll say from dot, so from the app folder dot models, inside this models, import, what should it import for me? The post model. Now it's imported, so let's go ahead and register this. So I'll say admin, so I'm using this Django contrib admin import, so admin.site.register, and then here what we want to register, we want to register this post model. So let's copy this and paste it here. Now save it, and let's go back to browser. Now here we'll type our domain name, which is the local host now. So here we can type admin, and here now I'll say admin, the username was admin, so the password, I'll say password 123, and logged in. And we are here, we got our groups, our users, and also our posts. So we can create, delete, and update the posts here also. But for now, we are ready to understand the serialization. Now let's go back to VS Code, and here let's close all these because we don't need them anymore. So here, to use a serialization, we must create inside our app, and don't forget, not the core project, inside the app you're creating. So for us, it is REST API. So inside this, I'll create another file and call this Serializer. So serializers.py. So serializer.py is created now for us. Now inside this, we have to import the serializers from Django REST framework. So I say from REST underscore framework import what we need the serializers. So we will import the serializers. Then of course, what we want to serialize, we want to serialize our model of post. You can have many models here, and if you want to serialize them, you have to import them here so that you can do this. So now here I'll say from .models. So from models file, it should import what? It should import the post model for us, like this. Now the model is also imported, so we need to create the serializer class. So I'll say class, and I'll call this post serializer. So now remember you should use this naming convention. So you use your model name and then append this with serializer. So if it was a user model, you would say user serializer like this. So the class name convention should be like this. Now inside this, it should inherit from serializers and then it should be serializers. So there are two ways of using serializers. The first one is serializers.serializer and the second one is the model. So let me first show you the serializers like this, and then later on we will change everything to model serializer, which is much better than this one. So let's go ahead. Now here we need every field of our model again. So let's go back to models and here just copy everything and paste it here. Now let's make the indentation. Now it's indented, and here instead of these models we will be using the serializers. So serializers.char field, and email field. Now everything is looking good, and here after this we need to create two functions, because if you use the serializers like this you have to do everything manually. And that's why I'm using this one, so you understand why the model serializer is better than this one. Now here I'll be using just a def of create, so a function of create, and this function of create will take self and also validate data as parameter. So validated data will be these data which we will get from the request. Now here I'll say return, so it should return something. So it will be post, so the model name dot objects, and what we want to do here, we want to create. So what we want to create, we want to create all the validated data or the past data inside our request. So let's copy this parameter and paste it here. That was the first function, and the second we'll be using for the update also. So def, and I'll call this update, and as you see everything is created for me. But for now let's remove everything so that you understand everything better. Now here we got the self and instance, and at the start of the project I show you this instance, so that's why I wanted you to understand the instance, because now we know what the instance is and why we're using this. And then we got again our validated data. So now here inside this update we'll say instance dot what, the first field is title, so I'll be using title, and this should be equal to, and again we will say validate data, and also here it's a get function, so we'll get that. So get, what should it get? It should get the title for me, and this should be validated data dot title like this. Now let me copy this one because we'll be using this for the other field also. So I'll paste it twice, and here if you press Ctrl D or Command D inside Mac, so you can use all those three same named variables together. Now here I'll say they should be author, and then we remove this and paste the new one here like that. Now then we need the email, so again Command D and then D again, and here we'll be pasting this also. So we are ready to go and test out everything. Now for this, first of all I'll be using everything inside the Django shell. So here I'll say Python 3 manage.py like this and shell. Now if you're not familiar with these commands, they're all here inside this Django REST framework tutorial. So if you come down here, you'll see we got this python manage.py shell, and these are the imports which we have to do. But let's go ahead and do it together. So here first of all we need to import the model which we want to serialize. So in this way it is the model of this post. So let's import the post model here. So I say import not import, but from REST underscore API, which is the app name. So this one here, dot models, inside the models file, which is this one here, and it should import, what should it import for me? It should import the post model for me, and it's imported. So the next, we need to import from serializers.py, we have to import the class of post serializer. So now again I'll say from REST underscore API dot serializers here, so serializers, and it should import this post serializer for me. So let's copy this one and paste it again here. Now after serializing this post model, as I said before, we have to convert the data to JSON. So that's why we need the JSON renderer and also the JSON parser from REST framework. So for this, I'll go here inside the browser. As you see, we got these two import here. So let's copy this one, and I'll go back to VS Code and paste it here and press enter. So now from REST framework.renderers, we have imported the JSON renderer. Then after this, we will be using the JSON parser also to parse the data. So let's go ahead and use this one also. So here I'll paste it out. So from REST framework.parsers, we import the JSON parser also here. Now I'll press enter. So now we got everything we need for our serializing. Now let's go ahead and create some data to play with. Now for this, I'll create an object. So for this, I'll say here the post is equal to, and then we need our post model, and then inside this we will say the title. So the title is equal to, we'll give it some title, so test title 1, like this, and after this we'll have some author here. So author is equal to, and this time it will be coding straight, so like this, and then we will give it an email address, so email@example.com, like this, and then we close the parentheses and also press the enter. Now the data is created, so let's save this. So I'll say post.save, and it will save the data for me inside the database. So now let's go ahead inside the admin and see if the data is saved properly. So I'll go here and refresh this one and go inside posts. As you see, we got a post here. So this is test title 1, and the author is coding straight, and also the same email which we have used. So everything is working so far. Now let's go ahead and create some more data. So I'll go back here and create test title 2. So here I'll just say 2, and also instead of coding straight, here I'll say learning Django or whatever, and here the email address will be the same. So let's just save this one also, like this, and now everything is saved for me. So now here we can use this data and serialize them. So for this, I'll say here just a variable name, so serializer, like this, and this should be equal to, now we'll be using the post serializer, so which the class which we have imported, like this, and inside this post serializer we'll give our object, so that was with the name of post, like this. Now post, and we press enter, and then we can say serializer, like this, and dot data. Now it should show me the data inside the serializer. Now they are here. As you see, we got this title, and this is test title 2, which was the second data which we have saved here, and it's here, and also learn Django was the name, and everything is as we created here. So it means we have successfully serialized this post instance. So now, as we got this Python dictionary or native Python data type, we can just convert it to JSON. Now for this, I'll just say here content or whatever you call this, And now I'll be using the JSON renderer. So I'll copy this one and I'll say JSON renderer. What do we want to render? So I say JSON renderer dot render. So it should render something for me. And inside this we'll say what should it render. So it should render the serializer. So this object which we have created here dot data, the data from that, like this. Let's close this one and then press the enter. Now the serializer data is rendered as JSON and is inside this content. So let's print out this content. Now as you see, we got everything as JSON. Now as you see, we have just rendered, or we have serialized just one instance of data. So let's see how to serialize all data from our post model. So for this, I'll say serializer again, serializer, and here we will use the name of our serializer class, which is post serializer, and inside this we will run a query set. So here I'll say post, which is the model name, dot objects dot all. So I'll get everything from our post model, and then here I'll say just money is equal to true. So this way you get all the data and you serialize all the data together. Now here we have serialized just an instance of data, and now we are serializing a query set like this. Now enter, it's done. Here I'll say again serializer dot data. Now as you see, we got the title 1 and also the title 2. So everything is ready for us to be rendered as JSON. So as you see, this easy it is to serialize the data using the Django REST framework. Now let's see how to do everything with Modal Serializer. So let me make the terminal smaller so you can see everything. Now here inside our serializers, I'll just remove everything. And here now, instead of the serializer, I'll say model serializer, like that. And then for model serializers, we'll create a class and we call this class meta. And then we register our model. So I'll say model, and here the model will be the post model, which we have imported here. And after this, we can define our fields. So fields is equal to, and we'll put everything inside a list or an array. And here we can define which fields we want to serialize. So for example, if I need just title and email, so we don't need to define the author here also. Now that's also a great thing from serializers. And also, as you see, we got just this class meta, model, and fields, and it should do everything for us. Now we can save it, and that's it. We got our serializer again. Now let me put the author also. So here I'll say I need the author also. Now I'll save it, and now if we go back to our shell, now here we can see what happens behind the scene, or what Django does for us behind the scene, because here we have defined just these 3 lines of code and it works everything for us, and the rest is done by Django. So let's see what actually happens. So now here, if I'll say another serializer, so I'll say serializer and just use the serializer, so post serializer, and then we can print the representation of the serializer. So I'll say print here like this and representation of that, and then inside this we define what we need here, so it will be serializer, and let's close everything and print it. As you see, we got everything as we written before. Title, char field, maximum like this, author, char field, maximum so much, and also the email with the default of nothing. So as you see, everything is done by Django, and we don't need to type all those fields again and again here. So now if we get more models, everything will work just as clean for us. Now let's go back to documentation. Now here you can go inside using model serializers, and here as you see we got everything as I did. So if you forgot something, you can come back here inside model serializers and you can see how to use everything, so you don't need to remember everything. But for now, as we know what the serializers are and how to use them, let's go ahead and see what's next. So now let's go back to VS Code, and here I'll make the terminal first of all. So let's exit out of the shell first. So exit from here and I'll clear the terminal, and I'll make it a little bit smaller here so that you can see everything. And then here we have to just close these because we don't need them. So now instead of going directly to the REST framework, let me show you how to create a normal Django function-based API view. So for this, we'll go inside our views. So here, first of all, we'll import our model, which we want to serialize and also use the API of that. So I'll say from .models, it should import the post model for me. And then after this, we'll import the serializers also. So from .serializers, it should import the post serializer for me, just like this. So it will go ahead inside this serializers.py and import our class of post serializer. Now just like as we did inside shell, we are doing just here. So we have imported our model and we are using this post serializer class to serialize our model. Then after that we will convert everything to JSON. So that's why we need the JSON again also. So here I'll say from Django.http. Now here we want to give a response of JSON, so I'll say import, and this should be JSON response. And then after this we want to parse our data also, so that's why we need the JSON parsers also. So from REST framework, now this functionality will be using from REST framework. So from REST framework dot parsers, I'll just import the JSON parser. So import JSON parser. Now everything is imported for us. So here we can create our views now. Now for the first view, we'll say the dev, and this will be posts. So just like post. And then I'll say it takes the parameter of request inside this. So inside this post, we will just run an if statement. And here I'll say if request dot method. So the method, if the method of this request is equal to, so it's equal to get, then it should do this for me. Here I'll say posts is equal to, and then it should be post dot objects dot all. So it's our query set. Now let me comment this also so you don't forget this. So it's a query set. Now as I said, when we got a query set, we have to serialize this also. So now let's go ahead and serialize this. For this I'll say serializer. So I'll just call this serializer, and it should be equal to, and I'll say this is post serializer. So of course we need our class name again to serialize this data here. What do we want to serialize? And I'll say this post model. So I'll paste it here. And as I said before, if we are using a query set, so if you are fetching all data from a table, we have to put the many to true, because otherwise it will spit out an error, and that's not what we want. And after this we will return our response. So the response was JSON. So I'll say return, and this should be a JSON response. And inside this I'll say go ahead inside the serializer. So serializer, and take all the data from this. And also I'll say the save. So the parameter here just will be like this. The save is equal to false, like this. And then I'll say lf, so else f of Python, lf, the request method, so the request dot method is equal to, and here if it's post, then it should do this for me. And here I'll say post data, so post data is equal to, now here we'll be using the JSON parser function, so JSON parser function dot parse, so it should parse the data for us. And what should it parse? Here we will say the request, so the data we are getting, so it should parse this for us. Now it will parse this for us. Then we need the serializer again, so serializers equal to, which serializer we have? We have the post serializer, and here we will say the data is equal to data. So after this we will handle our error, so I'll say if the serializer is valid, then it should save this, otherwise it should give the user an error status. So I'll say if serializer, and then we use the dot is valid, so you'll be using as valid function, so as valid, then it should say serializer. Now we'll save our serializer, so save it, no problem, everything is okay. And then of course we need our return. So after saving that, we need some JSON response, so this JSON response will be serializer.data, because the data is what we want. And here also we can define which status should it pass to the user or to us, so it will be 201, which is created. So this status means the data is created. So if it is false, then it should return an error. So I'll say JSON response again, and inside this I'll say serializer, and I'll say dot errors, so take an error. So here the status of this will be 400, like this. Now let's save this. So now let's go ahead and take care of the URL, because we have created our view but we don't have any URL or any path to check this URL if everything is working for us. So I'll go inside my REST API app, so it can be your app. Inside this I'll create another file, and it will be urls.py, like this. And inside this url.py we'll say first of all from Django what we need URLs. So from Django.urls just import the path for us, and then after using the path we need to import that view also. So let's go ahead, and now I'll say from dot views, and it should import the view which we have created. So the name of the view was like posts, like this. If we go ahead and check out everything, yes, the view is posts. So we have imported everything. Now let's go ahead and create our URL patterns. So here I'll say URL patterns. Now these are everything from Django Basic. If you are not familiar with Django, go ahead and watch my first video where I have explained everything about these URLs, models, views. With that being said, now let's go ahead and create the array, and inside this list we'll pass our URLs. So I'll say path, and then here the name of the URL, so I'll say posts, and we should give this a slash also, and after this we'll be using the name of the view which we want to use, so it is posts, like this. Or we can call this posts view, so it will be better for us. So let's go ahead and call this also posts view, and I'll copy this one, save it, let's import this, and also here posts view. Now it's much better, I think. Now again we have to register our URLs of this app inside our core or inside our project. So let's go ahead inside URLs, and here we have to import the include, so include, and then what we want to include, we want to include our app URL here. So I'll say path, and here I'll give no name because I want to use this as my main page. And then here I'll say include. So what should it include? It should include from REST underscore API, which is the app name here, and it should import the URLs like this, and it should be in a string, so that's why I'm getting this error like this. Now let's save this one. So now let's go ahead and check if everything is working. For this, I'll go back to the browser, and here instead of this admin, now let's remove this and we call the post name. So let's go ahead. So now we got an error here, so let's see what's wrong. And if we go back to our views, and here we made a mistake. I'm using the post here, but we need to use this post. So let's paste this one here instead of this post, because we are not using our model, but we want to use our query set to be serialized. Now let's save this one, and if we go back to browser and refresh this, as you can see, we got all the data as desired. So the 01 is the title, which is the first one, and we got also the second one, test title 2, test title 1. So everything is working as we want. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and understand what Postman is and why we need Postman. So for this, first of all, go to your browser and type Postman and then download. So after that, you will be here in this link. Just click on this. It will automatically detect your computer operating system. For me, it's Mac, so that's why it's saying I should download these apps. So go ahead and download this app. It will look something like this, which we will cover everything here in a moment. So go ahead and download it, and after this come back and see how we work with the Postman. So I have already downloaded, that's why I don't need to download this again. So I'll close this out. So after that, let me open the Postman. So you will see on a screen something like this. And here, of course, you can create an account and sign in, and that's the good way of using that. But for now, I'll just escape and go to the app. And now inside this app, as you see, it looks something like an UI here. So before making your user interface, like with React or Angular, Vue, etc., you can test your API views just here. So you don't need to have any kind of forms. So that's why nowadays in every company it's necessary to work with something like Postman. Now the Postman is very famous, so the chances are that you may also need in your new job the Postman also. So that's why we are using the Postman here also to test out everything. But also the REST framework gives us this optionality also. But for now, let me tell you how to use the Postman. Now for our purpose, we don't need all those environments and monitors, etc. We'll be just using these HTTP methods here. For us, it's important the get, post, put, patch, delete. So these are all we'll be using most of the time. So here, first of all, we can paste our URL, and then we can define which HTTP method we want to use for this URL. So here we can paste our URL or the endpoint. So every URL, for example, domain name and post, this is an endpoint. In API, we don't call this a URL but an endpoint. So we will have a lots of endpoints. For example, now we are fetching the post. We can have something for our authors or users, which we can say here the users. So that will be the users endpoint. For example, now we got this endpoint here. So let's copy this one and let's go back to Postman. And here I'll paste it and I'll say it's a get. So I'll say send. Now as you see, just like browser, we get all the data here. So you can see it's also the content type of this. It just detects which content type we got here. This is a JSON, so that's why it's showing the JSON here. And also if we got some keys and values we can use here. We can use also the authorization. So if we use the auth, then we can pass, for example, API key or a basic authentication where we pass our username and also the password. So we will be using this one also, but for now let's just ignore this. And then we got these headers. So inside the headers we can pass also some key and value. Then we got the body, which is very important for us. We'll be using this also all the time. And here we can create some data now. Now let me copy this JSON from here. I'll paste it here, and here I'll say it's the title tree, and this is new email. So new email at example.com, and the user will be our test user or test author here. Now let me save. And now as you see, I got an error. It says 403 forbidden. Now this error was with purpose because this way I wanted to show you something else. Now if we go inside serializations, you can see here we got this CSRF exempt. Now it says note that because we want to be able to post to this view from clients that won't have CSRF token, we need to mark the view as CSRF exempt. This isn't something you would normally want to do. So we won't be using this all the time, but now as our client, which is this Postman, it has no CSRF token, we have to use something like this. Now let's use this for our function. So for this, I'll go here and copy this import. So this one, and we'll go back to VS Code, and here inside our views, now let's paste this one, and also we'll be using this just above everything here. So this way it will work for us, but we have to put the @ sign also. So like this, let's save it, and if we go back to Postman and try to send this data again, now we got some error again here. It's a 500 internal server error. So let me see if the data is correct here. Oh, I have put a comma here, so let's send this again. And as you see, it says 201 created, so the comma was the problem. Now the data is here, so if we go back and start the get, so now if I go inside my params, and here I say again, and as you see, we got this data twice, but we got the data which we have created now. So if I go here also inside browser and refresh this, as you see, we got 2 more data here. So it means we are able to create the data also. So now as we can get the data and create the data, let's give some more functionality. And for example, to update the data, so we have this 2 titles with the same name here, so we can update them or delete them. And also if we have a details page, so we should be able to see the data from one ID. For example, if I paste here the ID of 1, we should see all the data related to the ID of 1 and not the others. So let's see how to do these things. For this, we'll go back to VS Code, and here inside our views, then we need to create another function. Now here I'll be using this CSRF exempt because we need this for each function, and I'll paste it here, and after this I'll create my function. So now I'll say div, and the function name here will be like post underscore detail. So details of the post will be this. Then I'll say here it should take the request, and also here we pass an ID, or you can say it's a primary key. It's up to you, but for now I'll say it's a primary key, so it should return the data from the ID which we get from the request. So now here I'll say try. So first of all, I want to try to fetch that data, and if we doesn't have those data, then it should give some exception. So I'll say try, and here what we want, I want post, and this is that post dot objects dot. Now here I'll say get, not all. And what should it get? Where the primary key is equal to this primary key of request. So where the ID of that post is equal to the requested ID from the user inside our HTTP request. So now if it doesn't found it, then it should give me some exception. So then we'll say except, and here we will say the exception. So here I'll say post dot does not exist, and then we will return here an exception code. So I'll say return an HTTP response here. So we need to import the HTTP response also. So I hope this is imported for me. Now it's not from client. We just need the HTTP response from this Django.http. So from here I'll say HTTP response like this. So we'll be using this one also here, HTTP response like this, and the status of this will be 404, so not found. So it will try to get this data. If it doesn't found, the user will get an 404 status, which means the data does not exist like this. And then we'll do another functionalities also. Now here I'll say if the request, now if the request is get, so dot method like this is get, so equal to get, then it should take the serializer. So serializer is equal to, now we need the serializer clause, which is post serializer. So here inside this we'll paste our instance. Now it is an instance of data, it's not a query set. So that's why I'll be using just this post, this data, and we don't need to put the many as equal to true. This is because this one we need just for a query set. And then after this we'll say return. So if the method is get, then it should return something also, and this should be a JSON response. And I'll say here serializer and dot data, so the data we get. And here again we define an else if. So elif the request dot method is equal to put. So if the request is put or patch, then what should it do? It should take, now first of all we will get the data. So I'll say JSON parser. Here we need the JSON parser, we want to parse the data. What should it pass? It should pass our request again, otherwise we won't be able to read this request. So request, and then I'll need a serializer here also, serializer, and this will equal to post serializer. And inside this now we need this post data because we want to update this instance. So let me comment this also as instance like this. So we need this instance of data and we want to update this one. So that's why we'll be using the post, and then we'll say data is equal to data. So it will fetch the data and update it for us like this. Now let's save it. And of course, like the post, here we have to check if the serializer or the data is valid. So for this I'll say again if now serializer, we got a new serializer here which is just an instance. So serializer dot is, now here is underscore valid, then it should do something for me. Now here I'll say again it should take the serializer and save it. So it will be serializer like this dot save, and then it should return a JSON response, of course. So JSON response, and this should be serializer dot data, so the data we are taking from this instance dot data, otherwise it should return an error. So return, and here I'll say again JSON response, and this will be serializer dot errors, and also we need to give some status. So again, I'll give here status of, for example, 400. So 400, like this. Now let's save this, and now let's take care of the delete also. So I'll say lf, and here I'll say request and dot method. So dot method is equal to delete now. So if the request method is delete, now this one, it will just delete that post data. So I'll say here post dot delete. So it will use the function of delete, not with capital letter, like this. And after deleting that, it should return an HTTP response. So like this, and this will be a status of, for example, 204, which is the data is deleted. Now let's save this also. So now, as you see, there are a lot, and you will say, oh god, I have to type everything like this. No guys, it's just because I want to show you step by step how everything is working. Later on, the code will be very small, and you will see the magic of REST framework, which will just convert all these codes into 2 or 3 lines. For now, just bear with me and watch how everything is working. Now after this, we got our functions, so we got our views. Of course, for this also we need the URLs. So let's go ahead and create our URLs. So now here we need to create a new view. So let's just copy this one and paste it here. But we have to import the new view also, and the name of this is post detail. So let's use this one and import it here. And also for this, we have to make a URL. So I'll say here details, like this. And then after this, we need an ID, and it will be an integer, of course. So it should be a primary key. Close this. And after this, it should return us this post detail and not post view. So let's use this one here, and let's save this. And after this, if we go back to browser, and here if I type post 1 now, enter, we get some error here because we are using this post. Now here I want to use the details, so the URL name is details, like this, and if we enter, we get exactly the details of that data. So if we use now the second one, like this, and enter, and as you see, we got the second title. So the same way for the third one, so we'll be using the third one, and as you see, we got everything as we want. Now let's go ahead and cite Postman and check if we can update those data also. So now here we have to change this URL also. Now it will be details and not posts anymore. And here as HTTP method, we'll be using the put. So let's use the fourth one, so it is 2 times 3. Let's update this one and make this one test title 4. So for this, I'll copy this and go inside body and paste it here. And here instead of this 3, I'll say 4. And also here I'll say test, new test email, and test user 2, like this. And we get the put. So now let's send this. But as you see, we got a 404 not found, and the reason is we are not passing the ID of that particular data. So here the ID of this was 4, not 3 but 4. Now if we send this again, as you see, it's updated. Now if we try to fetch the data again, so everything, so let's go ahead and get, and I'll say here posts and just remove this ID. And if we go here, as you see, we have updated successfully the data. It is as we want. So let's check this last functionality, which was the delete. So I'll change again here. It will be delete. And also what I want to delete, so I'll say details. So here I want to delete the post number 4. So I just want to delete this one. So for this, I'll go ahead and press the send, and it is deleted. So 204, no content, so it means it has been deleted. Now if I go back and get, So if I try to get this one, it doesn't find us. That's why we get an error. And also if I go here inside the posts and try to fetch everything like this, and as you see we got just 3 posts here. Now also the same way if we try this here, so if I go posts and collect everything, you can see we got just 3 posts here. So this way we can define the function based API using Django. So now let's go ahead and try something which is called API View Decorator. So we'll be using the decorators also. So now I'm using as the steps or here inside this Django documentation, so you can find every data I'm typing here also. So as you see we got this except, and also we got all those try and except, and also if the request is get, put or delete. So everything I'm getting from here. So don't worry, you don't need to type anything. You can just come back here anytime and copy everything or watch them again if you forgot. With that being said, now let's go ahead and use the API View Decorator for working with function-based views. So if we go until the end and say the part 2, as you see it starts also the same way with the API view. So we'll be using everything here, but if you forgot something, you can come back here and read everything what we are working. So the API view will give us more functionalities, a user interface, and also it will make our code more readable. So let's go ahead and try everything out and you will understand what I mean. For this, I'll go back to VS Code and here we'll go inside our views. Now here we will make some changes. We need our model, we need our serializer. The rest we don't need anymore. So I'll just remove everything from here. Now as you see, we are starting getting that errors, but it is good like that because we'll be changing all those errors with new data. So here I'll say from, and I'll import from REST framework. Now we are using the REST framework. So from REST framework dot decorators. So we need the decorators from REST framework, and from there it should import for us, as I said, API view. So API view here, and then from REST framework we need something else also. So from REST framework dot response, it should import the response for us. So import response, and also from REST framework dot status. So from REST framework it should import the status for us. So status. Now these are the imports which we'll be using here instead of all those errors. The first one is this CSRF we don't need this anymore, and instead of this here I'll type API view like this, and this API view is a function, and inside this we pass a list, and inside this list we define which HTTP method should be allowed to run inside my this function. So this function here. So here I'll allow the get, and also as we are creating the data, so I'll say the post is also allowed. But if someone try to delete or update something using this endpoint, they won't be able because it's not allowed, even if we write request here also. So for every errors here with JSON response, we'll be using the imported response. So we don't need this JSON response anymore. And also we don't need the safe as equal to false here. So I'll just remove it. We will need the post, so the data, and also we need to serialize this. And after this we'll be using the simple response from REST framework, and we don't need to import or use the JSON response from Django. And the second thing is here we don't need this data anymore, so we don't need to parse our data. So the JSON parser will be eliminated from here. Now instead of this data, here we can just type request.data. So we'll take the data directly from the request instead of JSON parser. Isn't that good? We got one line of code less here. Now let's go ahead and do this for others also. So we got this JSON response again. So we'll change everything with response. So here response, and also this one will be response. And also, as you noticed, we got this status and we have type 201, which is created. But if someone doesn't know what this code is, it's not readable. So that's why we got this status from REST framework. So here I'll say status is equal to status, which we have imported from REST framework, dot created. So you can see we got HTTP 201 created. So this way, if someone else read our code, they will just understand what we mean. So I made some mess here. Now let's remove it, and I'll say created like this and choose this one. And also for this status 400, now do you know what's the 400? I don't know this, so I'll say here it's a bad request. So let's say status dot bad request. Now you see it is 400 bad request. Now anyone can understand what we mean here. And also here we don't need this anymore, so we'll be using the same thing from here. So let's go ahead and paste it also here. It should be always on the top of the functions which you want to use. Now here we allow the get and the put, and also we are using the method of delete. So that's why I'll say here also put, not pause, put, and then here I'll say it should allow delete also. And again, instead of this HTTP response, we'll be using response here. So again, response like this. So let's remove all those JSON response also here. And this one was a JSON response. JSON response and HTTP response will be response like this. And here we don't need the JSON parser anymore because we get the data from the request. So here I'll say instead of this data, so data is equal to request dot data like this, and then just save everything. So as you see, we got no error. Now let's go ahead and see the functionality. Now for this we can use our Postman, but if we go back to browser and also inside our post and refresh this, and voila, you can see we got a UI for us. And inside this UI, it is just like Postman. We can work the way we used the Postman. So it says with this API endpoint, we can just get the data. So we get all those data here. And also we can post the data. So we don't need to use the Postman anymore. So if I say here, I'll just copy this one and paste it here. And here I'll say this will be the title 5. And here I'll say decorator. So decorator email, just for example. And here I'll say API view. So API view like this, and just post it. And as you see, it says everything is okay. 201 created. Now let's get the data, and there we go. We got everything available for us. So let me copy this URL from here and paste it here, and we'll be using the admin like this. And if we go inside our posts, and here we got more objects. Now let's take care of this also. For this we need one more functionality inside our models. So for this, here we'll need a function, and I'll say def, and it will be Esther, so it's a string. And then we need the self, and then here we will be using return. So what should it return? Self.title. So we'll be using the title, self.title. I'll just save it, and if we go back and refresh it, as you see, we can read those titles. Now the new title was the title 5, so let's open it, and as you see, decorator email, API view, and test title. So we can do everything without using the Postman also. So let's go ahead inside our details. So here I'll type details, and then we type the ID. So I'll fetch the ID of 1. So as you see, we get the data with the ID of 1, and everything is working for us. And here I also get the optionality to delete this. So now let's go ahead delete this one. I'll delete it, and it's gone. Now as you see, it says 204, no content. So we can update the data also. So if I go to the ID of 2 or 3, so if we go inside this and we want to update this one, we can just copy this, and here again we need everything as JSON, so let's copy everything here like this, and then the curly braces here, and then I'll say update or updated test user. So updated test user and updated test title. So updated test title and the email. So let's put it, and it's gone. And as you see, updated test title 3, updated test user. If we go back to our admin and here site post, you can see it's updated test title 3 already here. So as you see, with the help of decorator, we got this beautiful view of Django admin, and also we get all the functionalities, so we don't need the Postman anymore. And also you can't access this if you are not logged in anymore, because if you go inside the Postman and try to fetch something, now you see it says invalid username and password. Now for this, if I go inside authentication and I'll say just basic authentication, and here I'll give the username, so it will be admin, and also the password, so it will be password 123 like this. And now if I send this, now as you see, we get all those data. So it's also checking if user is authenticated or not, and we have done nothing for that. So this is why they use the API View Decorator. But bear with me, it will get more interesting, because this code will be more shorter and more readable. So let's go ahead and see what is next. So now we will understand the class-based views, and we will rewrite our API using the class-based views. So let's see what I mean. For this, I'll go back to documentation, and here from tutorial, you should go to class-based views. Now inside this, it will say we can also write our API view using class views rather than function-based views. As we will see, this is a powerful pattern that allows us to reuse common functionality, so we can reuse some of our code, and helps us to keep our code dry, so we won't be repeating ourselves all the time. So if you wanted, you can come all the time here, so I'll be using almost the same thing from here, but for now let's go ahead and see what it means and why we should use this API views instead of the function view. Now I'll go back to VS Code, and here we'll make some changes. Now instead of deleting all the data, so let them be here, and we will try our new code so you can see the difference also. So here, before this API view, we'll be using the new API class-based view. So for this, we need some imports also. So now here, I'll say here just a comment, and I'll say it is the class-based views. So class-based views, so we can understand this. Now here, we need to import something, and first of all we need to import the API view. So I'll say from REST framework. So from REST framework, it should import, or from REST framework.views, it should import for me the API view. And that's it. And now we are able to create our class-based API view. So here I'll say class because it's class-based. Now here I'll call this posts and API view, so we can understand that is from API view like this, and it will inherit from this API view. So that's why I'll say here API view. Now after this we'll just define our functions. So first of all, we have removed this. We don't need this anymore. So here we will say instead of this if request.method is equal to get, we can just create that method. So which method I need? It's get. So I'll say just get def get, and here we'll take self, and also we need the request parameter. And inside this, then we can type what we want. So I can just copy everything from here. So let me copy everything and paste it here. Now that's it. We get our data from our table, and then we serialize the data. Now as it's a query set, the main is to true, and then we return the response, which is the serialized data. And that's it. So it's looking much clearer. Now for the post, so I'll say def and the name of the function, which is post, and it's the same as your HTTP method. So here again we need self and we need the request again. So self and request. Then inside this we can copy everything from our post. So we said post, which is getting this data here, and also the error handling from here. So I'll just copy everything and just paste it here. That's it. We got everything as we want, and we don't need to pass all those if request method is equal to post or get. Okay, now for this it's done. So let's do the same thing for our details also. So here I'll say class and then the class name, which was just detail. So I'll say here the post detail API view. So it will be API view like this, and inside this then we can use the same functionality again. So it will extend the API view. Now not like this, API view, and here we will just paste all those data. Then first of all we need to get the data. Now there will be some difference. Okay, so let's go ahead and check everything. Now instead of pasting everything here, so we can copy and paste them, let's go ahead and use this code near them so you can see the difference. So it is post detail, so we'll be using this also here, so above them. And here as you see we got this post detail, and then we got the request and primary key. Now in this time we won't be using like this. We will say def, and we have a function of get object. So we'll say get underscore object, and inside this function then we will use self and also the primary key. You can use this also as ID. It's all up to you. Now here I can say pk, so primary key. So now inside this we can use our try and except. So let's copy this from here and paste it here. And here we will make some changes also, because we are using the class base now. So we don't need this process is equal to this. Instead of this we directly return this. So I'll say return, and it should return this post. So we should indent this also. So here return post.objects where the primary key is equal to primary key of the request like this, and then we need the except, and also this one should be indented. And here instead of this post with the lowercase we'll be using the model here. So I'll say post dot does not exist, and then I'll raise something. So instead of returning I'll say raise, and here we'll need to import something else also. so we can use this from, so here from django.http, so like this we will import, so we will import the http 404 like this, so it will handle everything for us. Let's copy this class-based API view, which is just here. So let's go ahead, and this is post details API view, and here we will raise just this one, so http 404. So the rest we don't need to care which kind of error this is, it will handle everything for us. Great. Now again for the others we'll be using the same thing. Then we'll say def, and we'll say if it is get, so what should it do? It should say self. Then we need the request, and also we need the primary key, and here also we need everything from get. So let's go ahead and copy everything. So if the request is get, then we do this. So I'll just copy everything from here and paste it just here. But here we need the post because we don't have any post here. So for this I'll say post, and this should be equal to, and here we will be using self dot get. So now we are using the function which is available for us, which is get object, and inside this I'll use the primary key. So it will go ahead and find out that primary key, and for using that primary key it will find the post for you. With this get object you don't need to type everything like this here. So if post is equal to post.objects.get, where primary key is equal to primary key, you'll just type this one here. Now after this we need something for put, which we update our data. So here again we need the function, so we'll say def, and we call this put. So def put, and then we need again self. So let's give me some enter here so we can see the difference. Now again we need the request and also the pk, so primary key. Now request, and they need the primary key, and after this we can copy everything from the bottom. So if the request is get, and then request is put, so we don't need to use this if else statement. Instead of this we'll be using a clear function here, so like this. And we don't have the post anymore, so I'll be copying this one because we need the post here also, like this. And then we have to use the error handling here, so let's copy this one from here and also paste it just below them. If I'll should indent this, and that's it. We got everything. We see if the serializer is valid, then we'll save it. If it's not valid, we'll give some error, and also the status is 404. But here we could also use the bad request, so use the bad request from status, so status dot bad request, so 400 bad request, so it will be more readable. And then after this we'll be using the delete. So for this, as usual, we need another function, and here I'll say def, and the name of this function will be delete, like this. And also it will take self, and also we need request and pk. Now here I'll type again, we need the post, so we'll be using this one, so I'll paste it here. So first of all we get that post, and then we delete that post. So how we delete it? We just use this one. I'll be using this also here, like this, paste it. And then instead of this 204, I'll be using no content, so I'll say status dot no content, so 204 no content, save. And now to use these views we'll create another URL for them so we can see the difference. Now for this I'll go back to urls.py, and here we'll create some more views. Now here I'll just comment out this one and also comment out this one because we don't need them anymore. So let's copy one of them and use it for the others. So here just this one, and also we'll be using this one again. So let's just copy and paste everything. But here now we'll be using new functions. So comma, and here from our views we'll need post API. So I'll paste it here, and then we need the post details API. So like this, and paste it also here. Now here we can use these functions instead of those here. So I said return this one, and for the details return this one. And here we can give him another name. So I'll just use API view. So I'll say API view like this, and also for this details also. So I'll say details API view, but the rest will be the same. But here, as we are using the class-based API view, we'll be using .as underscore and then view. We'll be using like this, so it will be a function. And for the next one also, so here .as underscore view function like this. Now let's save this and check out if everything is working. Now let's copy this link, and if we go back to browser, and here now if we try this one, it won't work. We'll get some error because those views are not available for us. So let's go ahead and check the first one. Now as you see, we got all the data with our new link, and we can post and also make some new data. So let's try this also. So I'll say here now title, so I'll say API view title. So API view title, and let's remove this 5 from here, and also let's use API view everywhere. So API view, and also let's remove this decorator from here. Instead of this, I'll say API view. Post it, and as you see, it's here. And if we get our data, and as you see, API view title, so everything is working. Now let's go ahead and check our details. So for this, I'll copy this one from here and go ahead and check it inside browser. So here details. Now the ID of this one is the 5 or 6, whatever, else using the 2. So the second is here, so it's working. Let's delete it. Do you want to delete? Yes, it is deleted. And let me update the data also. So I'll be using the third one here. Now let me update this one. So I'll copy it, paste it here, and update it, again update it. So I'll say here API, so it will be API view updated like this, and just I'll say put, and it's gone. So it's working. Now if we go and get that data again, we get everything. So updated this user, API view updated. Now if we go inside our post, so which was post API view, now let's go ahead, and as you see, we got the updated also. So API view updated. So all the functionality is working as it is, but inside our code we got more readability. So as you see, we can read everything. It's just human readable, and also we are not repeating ourselves. For example, if request.method is get or it's post, we just use get object, get, put, and delete. So it's much better as before. So let's go ahead and see what's next for us. So with class-based API view, we have seen how to make our code more readable and also a little bit shorter. But let me show you the magic of make sense and generics. You will see how to convert all these codes into 2 or 3 lines. So let's go ahead and do it. Now for this, here I need to import, so from REST framework, again we have to import generics. So import, the first thing will be generics like this, and from REST framework again we need to import the makes-sense. Now instead of using all the method here, let me create a new method and show you everything also separately. So first of all we need to create a class. So I'll create a class and I'll name this generic API view. So like this, generic API view. So this will extend the generics.generic API view, and then we can use the makes-sense. Now the makes-sense is used for all the CRUD functionality we need. For example, we can list our data, we can update our data. For that we just need to say dot, then we get all those functions here. Now you can see create model makes-sense, destroy model makes-sense, list model makes-sense, retrieve model makes-sense. So this way we can use all these functionalities instead of these def get functions. Let me show you. Now here I'll say list model makes-sense. Now first of all I want to list my data so we can see the difference. And here we'll need serializer class. So always remember you have to type it like this, and this will be equal to now what? Our serializer class. So we got post serializer. So we'll be using the post serializer here. And then we need to type our query set. Now don't forget you have to type this just like this, query set. Now the query set will be post, so your model name, dot objects, so we'll get every data from model, so dot all. Now we are done with this, and then we can start just using the makes-sense, and you'll see how easy it is to do everything. Now I'll say here def, and then I'll say get. So and inside this we'll be using self and request as before, so self and request, but here we will return just self.list. So self.list, and inside this we'll be using the request parameter, and that's it. Our function is ready. Can you believe that? Let's go ahead and see if it's working. I'll save this one and I'll copy this one because we have to create the URL for this. So I'll go inside our URLs, and here I'll comment out everything. So let's comment out this one and this one also. Now we got nothing, so let's go ahead and create or import this one first here. So the function is imported. Now here let me copy one of them, so let me copy this one from here. Just copy this and paste it here. Now we'll remove the comment from this, and then we'll be using this function of generic API view, and I'll call this also generic API view, so like this. Let's save this. Now after this I'll go back to my browser, and here now if we refresh we don't get this URL because we don't have it anymore. But here now let me paste the new URL. So I'll press the enter, and as you see we got all our data and everything with just this a small amount of code here. Now let's make this more interesting. So I'll create another function here. So here I'll say def, and this time my function will be post because we want to create also. So I'll say post and self, and then we'll need the request. So request, and also here we'll say return. Now what should return? Self dot create. Now we don't have this create at the moment because we have to import this from makes-sense. Now here I'll put a comma and I'll say makes-sense like this dot what? Create model makes-sense. Now we got this function also here. So I'll say here what should it create? It should create our requested data, and that's it. we don't need to type anything else. Now let's save this and check it out. I come back here, refresh it, and voila, we get everything where we can create a new data. So let's use this as generic. So I'll say generic API view like this, and I'll say generic at generic.com, generic at example.com, so like this, and the header of this will be coding straight. So let's go ahead, and don't forget to subscribe Coding Straight if you like this. Now let's paste it, and as you see, the data is here. If we get it, now you can see we got generic API view and also Coding Straight, the author, and also generic at example.com. So we got everything as before. Now let's make this more interesting for other options. So I'll go back to VS Code, and here we'll try to update it. We can update it, of course. Now let's go ahead inside make sense. Now I'll say here again make sense dot. What I want to do, I want to destroy the data, list the data, retrieve the data. What I want to update the data. So I'll be using the update, and let me copy this function from here and just paste it for the update also. And this will be called, of course, update, but here we will be using the function of put and the update function from makesense. So update like this. And to update some data, we need also an ID here. So first of all, for update, here I'll say the ID is none, because we'll be using a lookup field for this ID here. So here I'll say lookup field is equal to, and we'll name it ID here. So this way the Django will search for that parameter of ID here. Now after this, also for this get, we have to make some changes, because if we use this like this and also change our URLs here with some ID, then we will get some error, because it will not find any kind of ID here. So that's why we'll be using the ID here also. So I'll give the ID here, and also I'll be using an if statement. So I'll say if there's an ID, then it should return, so the return, and here I'll say self dot, but before using that we have to import this, and this is another make sense which is called retrieve. So dot retrieve, so retrieve model make sense, and we'll be using this here. So self dot retrieve, so if there's an ID, then retrieve, otherwise else, then it should return our list here, just like this. Now inside this retrieve, we'll be using the request also. So let me paste this here also, save it, and now we'll go back to our URLs, and here we have to put the ID field also. Now let me do this, and here I'll say just ID, and I need a slash here also. So let's go back, and if we refresh here, we don't get anything because it's not finding the ID. But if we put the ID here, for example 4, now as you see it's saying it's not finding that, but let me give this the ID of 3, so we got the data. Now let's go ahead and check everything inside the Postman also. So I'll copy this endpoint, and I'll go back to Postman, and from here I'll just paste it here and send, and as you see we get everything. Now let's go ahead and try to update this. So now here I'll be just saying here the new updated, so new updated like this, and also new updated email, so new updated email like that, and we'll be leaving this as coding straight. So let me send this and see if everything is working. Now I'll send it. Now we get text plain. Oh, I forgot to use this data as JSON, so we are sending all the data as text. That's why it's not finding this. So let's use JSON and send it again, and we get a valid email address. Of course, we have changed the email address here, so let's remove this, and here's, I'll say, exampleupdated.com, like this. So it should look like an email address. Now let's save this, and as you see, we got everything updated. And if we go back in browser and refresh here, you see we got everything updated for us. Now let's see how to use the delete functionality also. For this, I'll go here, and inside make sense, of course, we need to bring another function, so comma, and here I'll say make sense dot destroy. We want to delete some data, so we will use the destroy function here, and I'll copy the update because it will be similar to update. And let me copy this again here, and here the name of this, let me first indent this, and here it will be delete, and here we'll be using self.destroy like this. And after this, we save it, and if we go back and refresh here, and you can see we got the delete option also here. So if we click this button and click delete, the data is deleted, so 204, no content. So we got everything working for us. So now if we go back to VS Code, you can see for all the CRUD functionality, we got just this code here. Now look at this one and also this one here. Now just the getting and creating takes more text than this here. So if you see all this here and this, you can understand how magicful the Django REST framework is. Now don't worry, that's not it, because we can make this also more shorter code here. But before using the view sets and make this code shorter, so let's go ahead and understand the basics of authentication. Because at the moment the users can access to our API without authentication, so they can just delete and update our data without any permission. So let's create some authentication system, and of course I'll be using just the basic ones to show you an overview, because for authentication itself we need another video of 2-3 hours where we can cover everything. So for now, I'll be just using the basic authentications and session authentications, and I'll show you how to use them. But in future, I'll create another video just for authentication, and you'll see how to use everything inside the authentication. But for now, let's use the basics and see how everything is working. So for this, we'll go here inside our imports, and here after make sense, I'll import the authentication. So now I'll say here from REST framework and dot authentication. So of course we need the authentication. It should import for me, and we got 3 types of authentication. One is session authentication, then we got basic authentication, and also we got token based authentication. Now the session authentication and basic authentication, so it's base, not base, we are using the basic, so it will be basic authentication, is used for browsers, but the token authentication is used for application, for example your mobile apps or your desktop applications. So there you will be using the authentication as token because you got no session, and also the basic authentication is not used for production. If you use this for production, you must use HTTPS, so always remember to use the HTTPS protocol if you use the basic authentication for your production projects. And also you have to remember that your users should pass the password and also their username. So with that being said, let's see how it is working. So here inside generic API view, we'll just need to add something else which is called authentication classes. And here this will be equal to what we have provided. So inside a list, we will use our imports. So inside this list, I'll say just session authentication. So it will be session authentication, and I'll be using the basic authentication. So this means if the session authentication doesn't work or it got some problems, so this should use the basic authentication. Of course, you can use this vice versa. You can use the basic authentication first and then session authentication. But I leave it like this. Now to check if our users are authenticated or not, we have to import the S authentication also from the permissions of REST framework. Now here I'll say from REST framework, so again dot permissions. Now here it should import for me as authenticated. So there are a lot of them, but I'll be using just the as authenticated, so you can prove is it admin user or is it read only, but I'm using just as authenticated for now. So like this we can prove if our user is logged in or not. Now let's use this here. Now after the sessions and basic authentication, we'll be using here the permission classes. So permission classes is equal to, so here inside the array we'll be using the as authenticated. Now let's save this one, and if we go back to browser, and here if we try to open everything, so here I'll say the fourth one, but I think the 10th one is here. So we got this data here. Now we are getting this data because we are logged in as admin. So if I go back to the admin, and here I'll say logout. Now if I go back here inside my generic API, now refresh this, as you say it says authentication credentials were not provided, so I'm not logged in. Now the same way we can check everything inside the Postman. So if we go inside the Postman and try to fetch the 10, so the ID of that was 10, and I'm not putting that, so just get this one and I'll send it. And as you see, we get everything here because inside the authorization I'm using my admin and password. But if I say inherit from auth from parent, then it says authentication credentials were not provided. So this way now we have secured our API. So if I log in again, as you see, we get everything back. So now let's go ahead and see the token based authentication. Now for token based authentication, we'll be using the token base here, but also we need to install an app for this. So now you may thinking it's too much, but don't worry, you don't need to remember anything, because if you go to documentation and inside API guide, and here inside authentication, you'll find everything what I'm doing. So as you see, what I have imported and also what I'm using is everything is here. And also, as I said, for token based authentication, we'll be using an app, so we'll be using this app here. So let's copy this one, and I'll go to VS Code inside my settings.py, inside apps, and here I'll just register the new app. So let's save this, and of course this app got its own model, so for that we have to make migrations and also migrate. So I'll say python 3 manage.py and make migrations like this, and no changes detected, but I'll say here python 3 manage.py, then I'll say here migrate. Now the auth token table is available for us, so we can use it. Now let's go ahead inside our admin and see if it is already there. So I have to log in again. So it is admin, and here password was password 123. And inside this we got a new table which is tokens, and inside this you can add some token. But now as we got no front end for this, I'll just add a token here. So I'll use a token for my admin user, and I'll say save it just here, and then we can use this key to authenticate ourselves. Now let me copy this one from here, and after this I'll log out from here. Now we'll go back to our Postman, and inside Postman I'll be using also inherit from parent. So if I send this, it's saying, hey, you are not authenticated. But let me use another way. So here we got key and also the value. Now for key, I'll say here it should be authorization, and then I'll be using the value here. So I'll say token, it's a token, and I'll paste my token here. Now it's there, and let me send the data. Now as you see, we got this again because we are not using yet the token based authentication. So now let's go back to our views, and here we'll be using the token. Now here, instead of these two, let's remove them. I'll say token authorization. Save this, and if we go back to browser or the Postman, and here let's send this again. As you see, we got the data because we got our token. Now if I make some changes, for example, make a wrong token here, send this, it says invalid token, because it always goes inside our database, and from there it compares the tokens. If it doesn't match, then we'll get this error, and if they match, then we'll get access to our data. So for now, I don't want to give you more headache with authentication, because soon I'll create another video and it will be everything about authentication. So if you want to learn this also, just don't forget to subscribe my channel and you will not miss that video also. With that being said, let's go ahead and work on view sets. So now let's go ahead and learn what view sets are and how we can use this inside our project. So for this, I'll go here and I'll just import the view sets. So I'll say from REST framework, I'll import, and here I'll say view sets, just like that. And after this, we can create the class using the view set. Now before starting with view sets, let's understand some theory about this. To use the view sets, we need also routers. So the documentation says view set classes are almost the same thing as view classes, except that they provide operations such as retrieve or update, and not method handlers such as get or put. So with view sets, we don't need to use these HTTP methods, which is get, put, or post. So let me show what I mean. So if I go to API guide and from here to view sets, and as we get down here, you can see we will write all the view set functions like this. We will list, we will create, we will retrieve, we will update, we will partial update, and we will destroy. So we are not using all the HTTP methods which we would use normally in class views. For example, in def list, we would be using something like get. And for example, for update, we'll be using the put and not update. And also for destroy, we will be using delete. So it will be the HTTP method. So now with the help of view set, we can write all the functions just like this. So now to use the functions this way, we will also need the routers. Because if we write a function, for example, def update, the Django will not understand because Django expects put and not update. So that's why we need the routers to take care of all those HTTP requests. So let's go and see everything in action and you will understand this better. For this, we will go back to VS Code, and here we will need to import from REST framework the REST view set. So from REST framework, it should import for me the view sets like this. And we got this. Now let's create the new functions here also. So it's also class based. So I'll say class and it will be post view set like this. And it's just the name conventions. These names are what I define. You can call it anything you want, okay? It's not like this that you must use post view set. You can, for example, call this my post. So it will be my post. It doesn't really matter whatever you call this, but it matters what you are using inside this parenthesis. So if it is view sets, now it will inherit from view sets, so it means we will be using all the functionalities of view sets here. So I'll call this here post view sets so that we understand what we are using here. With that being said, now let's go ahead and write our functions. So now here we'll need to declare our functions. So I'll say def and the first one is list. So like this, and here I'll say also self, and then we also need the request. So self and request as parameter, and the rest of the functionality here will be also just like our class based view sets. So let's go down and find them out. So as you say, I got this post API view, and that is just all what we need there also. But instead of this get, we'll be using the list. So if I go back here and here, I'll just paste it like this. Now let me indent this, and we're good to go. And also the same way we need for create. So for creating the data, we'll go ahead and create another function. Here I'll say def, and I'll call this create here, and then we need of course self and also the request, and the rest we can just copy from our create. So from this post here, now let's use this. So as you see, we are no more using post, but we'll say create directly here. So now I'll paste it here. Now it's also here. So let's save this. And also we need our URLs. So for URLs, as I said, we need the router. So if we go back to documentation, it says we need the routers. So here are the routers and how to use them. So first of all, from REST framework, we will import the routers. So let me just copy this one and I'll paste it here inside our URLs like this. So let's save this one, and here we'll be using the router. So for this, we can say router is equal to, and this will be routers. So we are using this routers now. Dot, and here we'll be saying simple router. Now before Django 4, it was default router, but in Django 4, we call this simple router like this, and it will be a function. So after this, we can use the router. Now here I'll say router dot register. So we register our route here. Now we gave it a name just like our URLs. So the name of this, I'll say posts, and after this we'll be using our view set. So let's copy this one. I said post view set. Now we will import this here also because we need this now. Now I'll say comma and paste this one here. And now here we can use this new view set like this. And also we can give it a base name, but if you don't give it a base name, then the router will create a base name just using your query set. But if you inside your views you don't have any kind of query set, then you'll get an error. So if inside your functions there is no query set, please don't forget to use the base name. So here I'll say the base name of this. So I'll say again it is post. just like that, and I'll save it. Now we are not done yet because we should use the router also. Now let's go back to documentation. Now we have two possibilities to use this. The first one is to use the URL patterns. So we'll say just like this here. So after our URL patterns, we can say URL patterns plus equal to router.urls, or we can use the include. So we will import the include, and also we can say path and use the include one. So it's all up to you how you use it. Let me try this one with include. So I'll copy this one. So let's go back to VS Code, and here I'll be pasting this here. Now I'm using the include one because it's looking just like our normal paths, and it's looking much better than the other option. Now we need the include also, so let's import this also. Now as you see, we got no errors anymore. So let's save it and try to get this post. So I'll copy this one, and if we go back inside our browser, and here I'll just use this post here like this, and we need the slash, of course. Now enter. Now it says it's unable to connect. Now let's see what's the problem. And if I go inside the server, it says text at mode 2 arguments. So post view sets. Now let's go ahead. Did we forget something? Now of course we are using the view sets, but we should use view sets dot view set here like this, and let's save this, and it's working again. Now let's go back and refresh this. Now as you see, we got all the data using the view set, and also of course we can create a new data because these two functionality are available for us. So if we go to our view set, you can see we can list the data and we can create the data. Of course we can use the other methods also. For example, if I go to view sets here, we got all the other methods also. So it will be retrieve, update, and partial update, and destroy. So we can use everything just by copy pasting, but I don't want to waste your time because you can do everything yourself. Now you need to just type these function names. So for example, retrieve or update, and then after this you have to copy everything from the below functions. So if you are using the update, so you'll come here and copy everything from this put data here. So instead of wasting your time, let's go ahead and use generic view sets, which is more interesting than this one because that is much shorter and everything will look more beautiful. Now let's go ahead and remove everything from here, and then I'll be using here the view set dot, and then we need the generic view set. So again, with generic view set we can use also the make sense. So let's go ahead and do this also. So I'll say make sense, and then I'll be using the first one, so it will be make sense dot list. So dot list, and also let me use the create one. So I'll say make sense dot create. So create model make sense and save it. And after this we need to use our query set and serializer here. So let's copy them also, and I'll paste them here, and that's it. We don't need to do anything else. Now let's save this, and don't forget we are using the post view set, so this URL is the same as before. So we have just removed all the functions from here. Now let's go ahead and test out everything. Now if I go back to the browser, and here if I refresh it, as you see, do you see any changes? Because we have all the data, we can create this. Now let's use something else, for example to delete the data. For this I'll go back here, and as you can imagine I'll just add the make sense. So I'll say here like make sense, and what we need from make sense, dot, and I'll say destroy. Like this, save it, and if we go back and refresh, and of course here we need the ID, so the ID one of them, so I'll say the ID of, for example, 12, and as you see we got the option of delete also. So we can delete this, but here it says method get not allowed because we are using the delete but we are not using the get method. So let's go ahead and use this one also. So for this we'll need the retrieve. So here I'll say comma and then make sense dot retrieve. So retrieve model makes sense, save it, and let's go back and refresh, and voila, we get our data. And of course now we can delete this also. So do you want to delete this? And we can delete it, but let's add the update also here. So for this I'll just go here and I'll say make sense. So make sense dot, and I'll need the update model make sense, save it, and if we go back and refresh this, we got the update optionality, and also the form is already filled for us. So I'll use this one for testing. So testing view sets update, like that, view sets update, and put, and as you see we got the data. Now if we go back and see the data here, now as you see, title testing view sets update. Perfect. Now as you see, we got everything by just 3 to 4 lines. Let me make this smaller so you can see everything here. Now I'll break down all the lines like this, and also here, so you can see everything better. But as you see, that's all what we need to write for a CRUD functionality. Isn't that great? I like it a lot. So now it's up to you if you want to use this way, so just short way, or using the other methods. So I show you everything because in some companies maybe they are using these methods, so they will be not new for you. But if you are using for yourself the APIs, so this will be the best way because it takes care of everything, and you have to just type this short code, and that's it. And that's it, friends. We have done it. We have learned everything about Django REST framework, and we are able now to create our own API. And at the last, I hope you learned a lot from me, and if there were any problems, please let me know in comment. And also, if you want to learn more about Django, don't forget to subscribe my channel because I'll show you also how to use these APIs with frontends like React, Vue.js, Next.js. With that being said, I wish you a best time, have a nice day, and see you again.